Hello, everyone. Father Scott Vanderveer here. Hello to everyone in our small groups, and hello to everyone who's watching from beyond. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about moments that make us cry out to God. Seriously, God? Seriously, this is what you're asking us to face? The seriously God moment that comes to mind first when I'm asked, when have you called out to God in that kind of way, is a time when I was a priest a few years ago, and I was called to do the funeral for a young woman who had died of suicide. She had been mentally ill for a long time, and her mother had worried for years that her daughter would die of suicide. She was aware that that was a very big risk, and she was so sad to know that there was a good chance she was going to have to deal with a parent's most unthinkable sorrow, the sorrow of seeing a child die in that way. The story that I got to know more about when the inevitable happened, her daughter, it turns out, was terminally mentally ill. And that terminal mental illness led to her one day dying of suicide. One of the things I learned from this situation is I no longer say commit suicide, because it's been pointed out to me by people who work in the mental health field that commit is a word used for a crime. And suicide is a tragedy. It hurts families to say commit suicide, whether they put words to that or not, because it turns a tragedy into a crime, and it's already hard enough. So I learned from this experience, don't say commit suicide. It's kinder to say died of suicide, such as died of cancer. Anyway, back to the story. The day that this young woman died, she was in her 30s. Her mother, who was in her 50s, found her. She immediately called her best friend, a friend who had known this daughter since she was born, a friend who she had confided in many times, I'm so afraid that my daughter one day will die of suicide. And she called her best friend to come over to the house. She said, I can't believe I'm calling to tell you this, but it finally happened. Our beloved daughter has died. She died of suicide. I just found her. I just called the police. Can you come over? Her friend didn't even hang up the phone. She said, I'll be right there, and then just left the phone and drove immediately to her house. When that best friend walked in the house and felt the heavy, heavy mantle of sorrow over the entire place, when she saw the look on her best friend's face and the deep sorrow, when she knew that the daughter of that best friend, a girl she'd known her entire life, was in the other room, deceased by her own hand, she was so filled with emotion. In that moment, she had a massive heart attack and she dropped to the ground. When the police came, they called the medics, who pronounced her dead on the scene. So this woman lost her daughter to suicide and her best friend to a broken heart in the same day. I had the funeral for the daughter, and it was in a funeral home. And I told that mother, I am going to pray for you every day. And it was years ago, and I still pray for her by name every day. Because I can't imagine. I bring this up because all of us know a worst story in our life. It might not be like the one I shared, but it brings up a big question, a deep question, a question that cannot be ignored by people of faith. If God is all good, and if God is all powerful, why do bad things happen? Why do such terrible things happen to good people. There have been books written about this. Their philosophers and theologians have spoken volumes on this. And one of the most interesting books about this was written by a rabbi, Harold Kushner, who wrote the book When Bad Things Happen to Good People. And he has an interesting explanation of why bad things happen to good people. And it's beautiful, and it is one of the most popular books perhaps in religion that was ever written. I'm not sure if that's true, but I suspect, given what a famous book it is, that is true. I think it might be 40 years old now, at least 35. Anyway, that book has helped many, many people. But I'm not sure it has the whole answer. When I read it, I think it has a lot of value. I think it has a lot to say. I am very moved by it. But I also think it smacks a bit of human wisdom. It doesn't sound just like God's wisdom. It sounds a bit like human wisdom. And I don't say that with disrespect, just with the awareness that God's ways are not our ways. One of the things we have to face is that God does not make sense. God does not make sense to us. Part of that is because we don't even have the operating system to understand God. As creatures, we can't possibly understand the maker of the universe, the maker of us, the maker of everything that exists. There's no way for us to. If we were like a computer system, we not only don't have the software to run that program, we're lacking some of the hardware. We don't have the ability to process who God is. I mean, for example, here's a fact about God that is so powerful. God, being God, is so great and so massive that God, plus the entire universe on top of God, is not more than God alone by God's self. I'm going to say that again. God plus the universe and God minus the universe is the same thing. God is so great, you could take all of the universe away and it wouldn't diminish God one bit. God plus the universe is not greater than God alone. Which is why if you've been reading the introduction to Seriously God, you heard that quote that said, a God who was small enough to be understood would not be big enough to be worshiped. In order for God to be God, we can't understand God. But we can always understand God better than we currently do. We can always know God more than we know God now. And that is the challenge. That's what every Lent is meant to be about. Getting to know God better than we've ever known God up until this point. The great way to know God better for most of us is to have an experience of great love or to have an experience of great suffering and find our way through. God is more apparent in times of great love. Like Victor Hugo said, to love another person is to see the face of God. But God is so far beyond us that it is only when we have moments of love, which the scriptures say God is love, and we know that love is transcendent. It goes beyond what we could ever describe. And also the depths of our sorrow, the depths of that mother, her suffering, when she lost her daughter and her best friend in the same day. That sorrow is a mystery to us. It's an ocean, as one mom said who lost a child. It's like being in an ocean of grief, and you can't see land on either side. That is the great mystery, that we seem to know God better when we love a lot or when we suffer hardly. Suffer badly, I guess I should say. So, one of the things we learn about God in this is that God is ineffable, a word that a lot of us don't know. It was a concept that I believe was begun by the poet and mystic and priest and doctor of the church, St. John of the Cross, who said, God is ineffable, meaning God can be known in a relationship, but God can't be thought. God can't be understood and mastered. God can be known through love, but not accessed through the thinking mind. So we can get closer to God in our lives through the doorways that God gives us. And this, if you're in a small group right now, this is one of those doorways, because it is a meeting place of love and suffering, where our willingness to grow in our relationship with God puts us in closer contact with God's beloved children. We grow in an experience of love by being in a group where we open our heart. And if we are to open ourselves, we are going to get in better touch through the opening with our sorrow and our suffering. So let us begin this journey of getting to know God better through love, since God cannot be understood, but can be known through the relationship that God wishes to have with us. That's what Jesus' life shows us. God wants a relationship with us, and will stop at nothing until God does. Thank you for joining us for this series. Let us all grow in our ability to say, seriously, God? And then to grow in our comfort with allowing God to be God, and for us to be on a never-ending journey of coming closer to knowing and loving God with our whole heart. God bless you all.